Hey there, kids. This is chapter 31 of the Oddmire, Book 1, The Changeling. Tin's arms burned from 100 tiny cuts as he half ran, half fell through the shrinking tunnel of thorns. Escape was his only thought. The thing followed with deliberate slowness. It filled the thorny corridor behind him. When the corridor expanded, the thing expanded. It was always just as close whenever Tin dared to glance back. Its body shrouded in tattered shadows, its face hidden in darkness. Feelings swelled in Tin's chest. There was fear, of course. His heart pounded with it. There was sadness. It welled up in his throat. Anger, desperation, panic, and cold. The unnatural cold washed over him and through him. His fingers were numb. His whole body ached. It was an empty ache of unfeeling, which was somehow worse than pain. Little by little, the numbness crept into his skull. Tin tore through the vines ahead of him, no longer feeling the sting of their barbs or the pull of the cords at all. His vision blurred and his head ached. It was becoming harder to focus, harder to think. Bones crunched and crackled beneath his feet. Terrible words that had been hiding in the back of his mind grew louder and louder until soon they were echoing in his mind like cannon fire. I don't belong. I will never belong. I am alone. The thing was inside his head. The thoughts were his own. Tin knew. He had kept them buried within himself for many years, but it was the thing that was pulling them out of him. He glanced backwards. It was right behind him. With his lungs burning from effort and panic and the biting cold, Tin made a final desperate leap and found himself bursting free of the nest of vines at last. The thorny brambles fell behind him, and Tin stumbled to the open ground, panting. He was free. He was finally free. So why was it still so dark? Had night fallen? Tim pushed himself up. Above him hung a dome of perfect darkness, an empty, starless void. He wasn't looking at the sky at all. He realized with a heavy weight in his chest, he was in the center of a bubble of inky black. It didn't matter what he escaped the vines, he was still completely trapped. The voice echoed in his mind. Slowly, Tin turned around. The thing was there, sliding out of the bramble, unhurried. Why are you doing this? Tin screamed. Why let me run at all? Why are you just toying with me? The creature answered calmly. The shadows danced and bobbed across the creature the way moonlit light ripples across water. It was difficult to tell where the thing ended and the dark dome began. There was light, light enough to see the earth at his feet and make out the edges of the creature, but where the light was coming from, he could not guess. Before he could give much matter, much thought, the words thundered in his skull again. I am alone. The force of the thought made Tin's head hurt. His legs gave out and he sank to his knees. I am alone, said the thing. Shut up, Tin said, but his voice sounded small and far away, said the creature. The thing breathed in deeply. Maybe there would still be magic around if you didn't go eating everybody, Tin managed. The thing's voice was dry and emotionless. The air felt thin as Tin tried to catch his breath. The thing moved closer. Tin's legs felt weak. It was circling him, but Tin could not find the energy to follow the creature any longer. He let his head sag and let the thing's voice wash against him like waves against a ship. The creature sighed. In a twisted way, its sigh reminded Tin of the way his mother sighed when she took fresh bread out of the oven and breathed in the sweet, warm smell of it. A contented sigh, a hungry sigh, and that happy memory stung his heart even more. Breathed the creature. Tin's lungs were slowly turning to ice. The world was tipping. Tin felt sick. He couldn't tell if he was falling or floating, not moving at all. He shut his eyes tight. The creature taunted. Tin could feel the wet breath of the thing on his neck. She found him. Tin said inexplicitly. The spinning world ground to a stop, and Tin opened his eyes. The creature was inches away from his face now, but Tin did not flinch. He took slow, deep breaths, and as he surveyed the thing up close, the shadows that made up its cloak looked more like smoke than solid fabric. My mother found coal? Tin asked again. His voice didn't sound quite so far away anymore. They're together? They're safe? The creature hesitated. Tin took a slow, deep breath. Had the creature backed away a few paces? It said angrily. Yeah, said Tin. I suppose I am, and in spite of himself, in spite of everything, Tin smiled. But it's nice to know that my mom and Cole are not. Above them, the creature's shell of living shadows cracked. Tin squinted as white light poured through the fractures in the thing's dark dome. He smelled pine needles and wet earth, and for just a moment he heard birdsong and felt a warm summer breeze on his face. Behind him, the thing made a strangled, angry noise. The shadows that formed the obsidian dome slid and scrambled over themselves to seal the gap and keep out the blinding light, but it was too late. Tin's eyes had already begun to adjust, and just beyond the bubble he had seen them. The queen was there in her furry cloak. On one side of her stood Fable, and on the other a small man with the floppy pointed ears, and there, not 20 feet away from Tin, were Cole and his mother, hand in hand. Tin's heart pounded against his ribs. The light dimmed and the image vanished. As the shadows flung themselves desperately over the gaps, they were thin, wispy things, and the light they still crept through them. The sunbeams grew dim and choked, but they were unyielding. From within, the globe no longer looked pure, inky black. It was gray, etched with myriad splintered cracks like glistening spider webs. The thing intoned, but its voice had lost its cold confidence. The cracks in the bubble were widening, and the shadows holding it together along the seams were stretched nearly transparent in their effort to keep the dome intact. Tin turned back to the thing. Was it smaller? He watched with fascination as shadows peeled off the thing's cloak to feed the faltering dome. For just an instant, as the inky layers shifted, he saw something deep inside the cloak of shadows shudder. Of course, I'm not alone, said Tin. Like you? Tin said. Wait, are you lonely? Tin's fear began to slip away. At that moment, the thing, tired and hungry and, yes, profoundly lonely, decided to just eat the brat quickly and get the whole thing over with. Tin's vision went black. And that's the end of chapter 31. And this is what chapter 32 looks like.